I think for me, my earliest memories are obviously my parents are still living in the same terrace house that I was born in 32 years ago. So memory-wise, it's about the community that I've been brought up with, a lot of the same faces. So having been with them for the last 32 years, my earliest memories are sort of playing in the street with them, going over to each other's houses. The school was just a stone's throw away, so it's them childhood memories of my friends at schools, my friends when I used to go to mosque, and then coming back, and it's almost them same faces that you see day in, day out. So the school I went to was Principal Primary School, which is it's just opposite the street from me, and the mosque I went to was down the road as well. I can't remember exactly the name of the street, but it was next to one of Al Halal supermarket, which a lot of people in Bradford will know where that is. So for me, like I said, they're kind of my childhood memories. I think school, a lot different to what it is now. We actually played out. We weren't stuck in mobile phones and gadgets. There was a lot more exploring as a youngster, but exploring of natural nature. So when we were in school, we would spend a lot of residentials. We were quite lucky with our school. We had quite a very big playing field. So we used to spend quite a bit of time on there during breaks and dinners, and we'd have annual sports days out there. So for me, them kind of memories of school was almost just the integration that you'd have with other young children, the teachers, and it was a very kind of respectful environment that we were in. And there was still the whole, you knew the difference between being a young person and just living life freely, but obviously the teacher's there to look after you. I think for me, people would say I've been quite a sporty person. So for me, I would always play as a youngster. In the streets, I would play, and it was generally me, and I'd have sort of almost the boys that were the same age as me. We would play in the street together. In fact, they'd come knocking on my door sometimes and they'd be like, "Can Halima come and play out?" So I would say I was probably one of maybe 2 or 3 of the girls in the street that would have quite an physical active lifestyle, whether that was in school or outside of school. And we tended to sort of play in the same areas, which was the school playing field, which I mentioned. That was opened at any time, so it wasn't just part of the school. We'd play in our streets, in our back streets. And we also had, next to where I live, is a home improvement store called Wicks. It's a car park now, but they had a very big derelict area where we would all just go down there. I'd say some would say make a bit of mischief, but we were just playing. So I would say them years ago it was never an issue, and I think it was key, the fact that we were young, so therefore it was never seen as an issue when young boys and girls played together, sort of between the ages of 10 to 14. You would just be treated as every other person in that group, and depending on whatever sport you played, it wasn't this stereotypical thing of because you're the girl you'd be the goalie if you were playing football, or because you're the girl and if you're playing cricket you'd end up fielding somewhere where you're never going to pick the ball up, or you never get picked a bat and ball. It was very inclusive, I'd say is the word, and nobody saw you as any different, especially at that young age group, and I think that's just the innocence of being young. When I was young, it was just seen as, it's kind of, she's out of the house, she's in the street, she's just playing, it's natural. I think the older I got, the harder it got, because then when the boys would come sort of knocking on the door, and this was when I'm sort of 12, 13, that's when my parents would open the door and say, no, she's not coming to play out. So it was, and when I say play out, that was more going to the field. I would still play in the street, but I was quite restricted then in where I was allowed to go and play. So it changed as I got older, and I suppose hitting that puberty age, it becomes very different as a sort of a young girl turning into sort of a young adult, and the differences that you face when you're trying to play in sports. During my school years, I never stopped playing sport, because then when you go into secondary school, I would do a lot more after school sports clubs, so I was captain of the rounders team. We never did cricket as a sport in high school. The boys would do cricket and the girls would do rounders. So sporting wise, within the educational side of it remained the same. It was then when I'd sort of come home that I wouldn't play out as much, or if I did, it was very limited to me and my brother just playing in the garden. It wouldn't be with the other boys in the street. We would play anywhere and everywhere where you could find a flat surface, and even then when we say flat there may still be gravel around. We would anything to makeshift your own wickets, so the kind of common were the bins or the crates. We'd take the milk bottles out of the crates and put two crates one on top of the other, and that would become our wickets. We generally had a bat, because what you'd find in the areas that we lived in, especially my older brother, they would all play cricket at a club level, so we would sneak off with their bats and their balls as well. So from a very young age we just got used to playing hardball cricket, and the reason for that was because nobody could afford a tennis ball, or if we got a ball it was because you almost I suppose the right word is to say you've taken, without saying stealing, you've taken your older siblings who played for a club. So from a very young age we were all used to playing, and I think some of the kind of anxieties that people get now is being hit with the ball, but actually if you've played from it from a very young age you just become resilient to that. I mean, at that time we only had the basic terrestrial channels, and that was just due to being a low-income family. So the only TV that you would get on the TV is when England would play on Channel 4, and every now and again it would be on BBC. So therefore our access to watching cricket or sport was quite limited unless it was the national side. However, saying that, we would religiously watch when Pakistan or England are playing. So my earliest memories would only ever be of a Pakistan-England game on TV. So you're looking back in your days of Wasim Akram, Waqar Younis, Imran Khan, Nasser Hussain for the England team. They were sort of my earliest memories of cricket. What inspired me was that combination of watching certain cricket on the TV and my brother also playing for a club and playing cricket. It was the only sport that was either ever watched or talked about in the family. So being the sporty person, that's naturally, I'd almost say I don't know what the right word to kind of put it is. I was almost pigeonholed without realising. Subconsciously I was pigeonholed into the cricketing side of things as opposed to other sports, because nobody else in the family was really interested in other sports. At a young age, there was nothing, it was just what would happen at school. So from primary and secondary age, when I left secondary school at 16 actually, cricket stopped for me totally. Then actually any sport stopped for me. And unfortunately, the only time I started playing cricket again was when I got my driving licence at 21. So I had a big gap in leaving the sport and then coming back into it. So for me, then kind of memories of actually having one-to-one coaching or going to a club, there was none of that. It was all whatever I did myself. I got my licence and then I looked into the local club, which was Bradford Ladies, and I think a lot of people just said it was just natural talent, and what I reserved and sort of the memories that I had from my childhood just coming back at that age of 21, and like I said, it was just down to natural talent, but I never had any specific coaching or going to group sessions. It was good. I found it a very welcoming environment. We used to train at Thornton Cricket Club, and that was the home ground as well. So if it was ever sunny in the town centre, it would be snowing in Thornton. So that's what I remembered, is that we were on this hill and we'd never get any warm weather. However, the club itself, when I first went there, I didn't really do trials as such. They just asked me to do a bit of batting and bowling. And credit to them, they never made me feel as an outsider, and I don't know if that's just different with women and men, but I did feel a part of the team from the onset. And then they started playing me in the second team to start off with, and then it was actually the coach and the manager there who said, you need to come into the first team. I was reluctant at first because I'd only ever played cricket in the streets, so going from playing cricket in the streets to then being asked to play in a first team for a club, it is quite nerve-wracking. However, I took the bullet and I just started playing, and from there it was just the way the team were making me feel that I just carried on playing for them. There was myself and one other Asian female, and that played in the team, and she is still playing for them. Unfortunately, I coach now more than I play, but at the time there was only two of us. Yeah, I mean, we were quite a strong team in ourselves, were Bradford Ladies. One of the things that was quite hard for us as a team, and I think that's down to the manager and the captain, was actually because everyone in Bradford, when it came to, there was only one Bradford Ladies team, so therefore we would have more than 11 women in the team, what tended to happen was we wouldn't play as many games. So the problem that we had was I might not have played every game, so how much game time I actually had was quite limited because we're trying to give everyone a fair go. But the reactions from the other teams, again, I didn't feel that there were any issues. We just got on with the game, and ultimately that's what people were there for. They were just playing the game. You get on with it, and you leave. I think at that time everyone thinks they could just play for England. So for me it was trying to progress onto that and develop myself, because one of the things, the reality that hits you when you play for a club is, yes, we play hardball cricket in the streets, but when you get to a club you see actually the force or the talent that is on the other side. And what became very apparent to me was my lack of coaching at a young age, or my lack of going to sessions, because ultimately my parents, number one, I didn't know anywhere where girls could play at a young age, but secondly, the battle that the parents wouldn't take me there. I mean, they were limiting my playing time just in the street with the neighbours, so there was no way they were going to then hop into a car and take me to training twice a week at a club. And for me that was the biggest kind of difference that started to show when I started to play for a club. And then the realisation almost hit in to say, actually I'm never going to make it to the elite level because I've come into this too late. But the reasons I've come into it quite late were factors outside of my own control. Yeah, definitely. And it's one of the reasons I went into coaching, was because I almost saw myself as that example and say, well, actually it'd be nice for me to do the research around what junior clubs there are, become a coach, try and coach some women, mainly try and get into them communities and show them that you can start coaching from a young age. And if you do grasp the young people at that age, they're more likely to try and then progress onto club counties and one day maybe have an Asian female playing for England. I think the support that there is now within the England Cricket Board and Yorkshire Cricket Board is huge to try and get more South Asians, whether it's at a playing capacity or within a coaching fan supporter. There is huge support now. However, when I first started my coaching, I think I gained my level 2 in 2007 or 2008. So you're looking at nearly just under 10 years ago. There was nothing then. And I think that was the key. So when I actually went onto my level 2 course, I had to pay for it out of my own pocket. So that was me working a part-time job to save up enough money, and at that time it cost me £280. And the closest course for me was in Bridlington, which again, it's nearly 2 hours from here. So again, it only happened because I had my car, so I would drive myself there every weekend, and it was over 2 weekends, on the Saturday and the Sunday. But because kind of like I said, the support wasn't there 10 years ago. It's a lot better now, so it was a lot harder to try and get into these. When I did my course, I was the only female on there as well, but not just the only female, but also the only Asian female, which was disappointing. However, now it is very different because the support mechanisms are there. We're reaching out to these communities a lot more, and we are getting more people through the books as coaches. I'm part of one of the local district teams, so West Yorkshire District, where I support with the coaching there. We also have my own club where I coach, Woodlands Cricket Club. We have a women and girls setup over there. We start from the age of 9 and it goes all the way up to under 15s, and then post under 15s we have the link with the Bradford ladies. I think there's a lot more support there now. It's just about people more being aware of that and knowing what the channels are. So if they wanted to work with clubs to try and increase the participation of females, or wanting to go to a club that's just an all-female environment, and you do have more coaches now as well. There are a lot more female coaches than there were 10 years ago. I think there's a huge interest. Within my club itself, we have 8 young girls from the ages of, I'd say, 12 to 15 that are from a South Asian background. The interest is always there. We have, last year we done a 10-week session at the club, which is in the Woodlands, is next towards Hull Stadium. These girls were travelling from Carmond, the Barker End area, so therefore you know that the commitment's there. These girls want to progress. One of them is now actually playing for the county side, so it just goes to show that actually if we can work on the factors maybe that I didn't have when I was a young girl, is the parents. So if we can work on these areas, the byproduct of that will be that we are getting more girls into cricket. I think sometimes people tend to focus on the person themselves, but actually it's the outside factors that we need to focus on, and if we can get to the bottom of them and encourage that participation, the byproduct of participation and playing will come through that. The clubs need to show, rather than just sort of saying that they're more inclusive to women and girls, for me I like to see that practically. How are you showing that you're more inclusive to women and girls? Because I've had many clubs that have said, yeah, we have women and girls and they're all welcome. But the things that I will look at is, well, actually, if you're working with women and girls, what does your clubhouse look like? What environment is there that shows that this is inclusive for women? Do you have the appropriate changing rooms? Are the girls and boys getting changed in the same place? So for me, I look at the more practical side of it rather than somebody just saying it. And I think that's what we need to drill down into the clubs, is how can they be a bit more inclusive to open this environment for women and girls. But at the same time, it's also then on the other side of it is, are we engaging with the parents? Are we engaging with the schools that can then engage with the parents? And one of the other factors I always believe is are we, so I think what we need to do is try and open up the channels and get some of these girls and the parents to watch a cricket game, a women's cricket game, whether it's at Yorkshire. But if we can open them up to that environment, they see that it's normal. Because at the moment, I'm not saying normal shouldn't be the word that we use, but it is the word, because when they see girls playing sports, especially these, my parents, that generation, when they see girls playing sport, they don't see it as normal. And I'm not saying that that's the right word to use, but if we can get them into an environment where they're seeing actually there's this whole environment where girls are playing cricket, all their parents are there to support them, it will open their eyes up a bit more. So, and I think it's taking them from becoming the fan to the spectator. And then once we get through that journey and they become spectators, they're more encouraging of their own daughters. I think it's not something that's going to happen overnight, and it will take years. I think we're in a generation now where I would still say at this point it's going to be another 10 years probably before we see a big step change. But one of the things the clubs can start to do, and I think some are starting to do, is just changing the way their club environments look. And it's not having it so boisterous, because notoriously people are looking at clubs and it's the environment that looks quite boyish, and you will always see men there. So I know when I'm sometimes going to a club, when I walk in and I park my car up, the first thing I see is the boundary rope. People are obviously go do their little walk arounds, but it's all men. Actually, how can we encourage the women to come to these games? So when the juniors are playing, rather than the dads bring them, can we get the mums to bring them? Can the club maybe hold on the same day as the junior games in the morning, a bit of a coffee morning for the mums, to say, well, whilst they're playing their 20 over aside, inside we've got a bit of a coffee morning for you, where we're just telling them what the club's about, how they can get involved as volunteers, as coaches, as players. So I think that's where the clubs can come in a bit more. I think one of the things is workforce, and I will always say that. And I think when I say workforce, it's Yorkshire actually being seen to have more of a female workforce in their presence. So whether that's from a grassroots level all the way to a board level. I know they are starting to make some changes now. They've appointed the first female onto a Yorkshire County Cricket Board. However, it needs to be more at a mid-management level as well, and a senior management level. I think having, unfortunately, a token person there, or one or two females, isn't going to solve the problem. We need to have a majority workforce that are women going out, and it is then women that will then go out there and try and develop the sport for women and girls. I think Yorkshire can be a bit more inclusive into, again, it goes back to my point, actually getting people to a game and showing them what women's cricket is about. Again, they are starting to do it a bit more now, but having the players come out to the community, some of the Yorkshire players come out into the community and deliver sessions to show that, and then drive them back into the club just as role models. So I think over the last few years, the last whole sport plan from England Cricket Board was all around South Asians in cricket, and although we've done a great job in trying to raise awareness of that, where we've fallen behind, and I think it's great that England can announce that they've had 4 Asian players going and playing in the overseas tour to Bangladesh. How many Asian women have gone over to the West Indies and played in that current ODI against the women? So I think for me personally, obviously being a woman as well, I think the huge attention has been on the male Asians. Obviously that will be the case because there is a greater number of them. However, there is Asian females as well, and I think we can do a bit more with them. My eldest brother, he's played in the Quaid-e-Azam League his whole life. I mean, he's 44 now, and he still claims that he wants to carry on playing in the Quaid-e-Azam League. So that's been my earliest memory of cricket and also the Quaid-e-Azam League, because he would play every Sunday. What we had the onerous task of doing was all the players would, it's like a lottery where they would pick out somebody to make the teas every week. So I used to remember having at least once a month having to make the teas so that my brother could then take them to the game on that Sunday. The actual league itself, apart from obviously my brother and knowing that we used to get international players coming to play in that league, is very limited, I would say, in that sense. Now I know a lot more about it because as I came into cricket, I started understanding what the different leagues, and being a Bradford girl, I also understood how the Quaid-e-Azam League work and the setup, and it's been around, many a years, and it's probably one of the best leagues. A lot of people will argue one of the best leagues in the country outside the county leagues, and the reason for that is because we get so many international players coming into that. So, and the only other kind of momentous moment that sticks out in the Quaid-e-Azam League was when Yusuf Yohanna played in the league. Who's a very good friend of my brother's, and he actually stayed at our house. So that was my only other memory, is thinking, I'm sure this person's an international Pakistan cricket player, and he's just casually sat there in our house, and he stayed for a few days. I didn't go to play any of the I didn't go to watch any of the matches, and I think that was down to, again, it's the whole Asian family cultural mentality. That the women wouldn't actually go out to watch these men play in their local clubs or leagues. It was a very male-dominant environment. So again, I suppose that's an association with the Quaid-e-Azam League, is that you never thought it was for women. I don't still think it's for women. I still think it's a very male-dominated league. It's a very male-dominant environment. Maybe there's an opportunity there for the Quaid-e-Azam League to set up some sort of a junior women's cup. But that's obviously time will see. And I think a lot of the men that now play in the Quaid-e-Azam League have families, whereas all the years ago, obviously, there were single men just joined up into a league and they would play every Sunday. But a lot of them, so like, for example, my brother now, he has two young kids. One of them's a girl, she's 10 years old, but actually there's an opportunity there to get all these men together and see how many girls there are, and could we set up just, even if it's a 6-7 week junior league just for them, and see where that takes us. Essentially the Quaid-e-Azam League started from nothing, and if we look at it today, it's huge. Is there an opportunity to replicate that now with females? I think a lot of it was almost practical because he'd come home with a trophy every other season, so we actually have a whole cabinet full of his trophies and medals. The only other one point that I do know about my brother is he was on Calendar News because he got selected. Well, what he was being told was that he was good enough to play for Yorkshire, but at that time Yorkshire had the rule that anybody that wasn't born here, and my brother came here when he was 11 or 12, weren't allowed to play in the Yorkshire League. And that's kind of the only other thing that I remember with him. At that time I was quite young, so I didn't really understand why he was on the news, but it was that whole backlash against Yorkshire not accepting overseas players, even though he'd been here majority of his life because he was born in Pakistan. But he was good enough, he still didn't get into the Yorkshire team. He wasn't very happy. I think obviously he carried on playing cricket where it was. I think for a young boy at his age to be told that you're good enough to play for this team, but the reason you can't get in is because of your cultural background or your birthplace, it's almost seen as racism and discrimination against somebody because they have a perfectly good ability to do something, but it's a factor that shouldn't really affect us, that was affecting him at that time. I know it's changed since then. Their first signing was Sachin Tendulkar, and it's opened up now. Yorkshire have got a few Asian players in the team, but at that time obviously it was devastating for him, and to this day he still thinks that he could have gone all the way and played for England if he'd have been allowed to have had that place in Yorkshire. Yeah, I think it's definitely, the feeling was there. How many people actually spoke out was a different thing. I think a lot of people settled with the mentality that what's the point of saying anything, they're not going to change their mind. In fact, that still happens now. A lot of people, when they're trying to engage with Yorkshire, still have the mentality of there's no point, they're not going to change, or they'll put on a token gesture. But actually we want to see a bit more partnership working, and when we talk about partnership working, it's actually 50-50 support, and not just Yorkshire saying yes you can do that or yes you can have that, because that's not partnership working. And I think a lot of people still have their reservations. A lot of changes have happened in Yorkshire for the better, and I'm hopeful with with appointing the first Asian male and having a female on the board that things will start to change. What I suppose the true test is to see if that comes forward over the next few months and we see how Yorkshire becomes more inclusive. I think it's a great example to show the youngsters at this age that actually you can, with hard work and perseverance, you can make it to your county and then also to your country as well. I think the great thing about Adil is that he still lives in the same house. Even after all this success has come to him, he's still living in the same street in BDA, and that's more of that's more of a role model and inspiration to these young kids, is to say it doesn't matter where your roots are. If you've got the mental strength and you've got the ability and you work hard, you can break into the ranks. I suppose the question that you ask is Adil or Azim, are they just token gestures, so Yorkshire just fill in a quota, or actually when more Asian players do start to come in and add a lot better, will we start seeing a split in the Yorkshire team of how many Asian players there are and how many non-Asian players there are? I think for me, the way I look at things is a club should always represent the demographics that they're in. So Yorkshire, obviously being Yorkshire wide, they will have quite a vast sort of demographics. However, if we take it one step back, I still come to a lot of junior boys games because I've entered our girls into a league, and we're the only girls team in this in the Bradford League. So when we play against boys. Now when I go to these games with the girls, I'm seeing 1 or 2 Asian boys in the team, and the rest are non-Asian. So for me, it has to start from that end there. Where I'm going to Bradford 3, which is a predominantly Asian area, I'm still seeing that the club in Bradford 3, the cricket club, still has 10 non-Asian players and 1 Asian player. So we need to try and tackle that at a club level. And then eventually, I think one of the other things that Yorkshire needs to start doing is the scouts coming out a bit more to where these communities are playing, where these South Asian boys are playing their cricket, and scouting out a bit more, because the setup of the scout system, I think, needs to be developed and reworked slightly. The scouts tend to just take what the clubs will give them. However, if the clubs are not having enough Asians, then we're never going to get the Asians at that level.